Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another fantastic session for the Hypnosis Masters Summit. And today, right now, we have with us Jørgen Rasmussen from Norway. I've actually met Jørgen a few years ago as we were both visiting some hypnosis conferences. And he's got a very, very cool way of doing things and of presenting his information. And I like that he's always very clear and very calm about the way he's doing things, and I like that. I appreciate that a lot. He has been practicing hypnosis for over 24 years, going on 25, and he's the creator of the psychological illusion model. And he's also the author of two books. One is called Provocative Hypnosis, and the other one is Provocative Suggestions. And he's, like I said, been doing this for many, many years, working with people. So let's everybody say welcome, Jørgen. Nice to see you here. Jørgen, thank you so much for saying yes to our invitation.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
I'm very, very excited. The topic of your presentation, the title of your presentation is No Self, No Problem. And I like that a lot because it's so cool, so true. So please tell us all about it. And I got my notebook here, and everybody who's watching, I suggest you have a notebook and your pen, and let's get started because I'm ready to take notes.
Yeah, I would encourage you guys to just kind of experientially follow along with these ideas and see how they sit with you. The first idea I'd like to offer is that we only really suffer with thoughts and feeling when we make a self out of them. And that might sound like a weird statement, like we only really suffer with thoughts and feelings when we make a self out of them. So I'll give you a basic idea around that. So quite often when I see clients, they'll be suffering, like they might be sitting in the chair, crying, telling their story and, telling the story about, how they're unlovable or how they're fundamentally broken or how the future looks bleak for them. And I'll look at them and I'll say, have you noticed that you're suffering quite a bit right now while I'm perfectly fine? And as I say this, they often look at me as if they want to strangle me because it sounds like the most assholic thing you could ever say to someone. So I'll say to them,
rub it in their face, basically.
Yeah, it sounds that way, but I'm kind of teasing them a bit. So I'm saying, okay, that sounds a bit assholic and me being Captain Obvious. But let me ask you this. Why are you suffering so much in this particular moment? And they usually say, well, I have all these thoughts and all these feelings. I say to them, has it occurred to you that I have to have the same thoughts in an attempt to understand you, pretty much? Meaning that when you say nobody loves me, or the future looks bleak, or I'm fundamentally broken, or I must be perfect, I have to kind of try those thoughts on in a way in an attempt to understand your experience. So I'm having many of the same types of thoughts, but I'm still not suffering. So it can't really be the thoughts themselves. And now they're often a bit puzzled, a little bit confused. And they go, would you like to guess why you're suffering a lot right now? Well, I'm not. And they go, why? I said, because when these thoughts occur to you right now, there's a claiming thought that says, oh, this is me. Like when the I am broken thought appears, there's kind of a claiming thought that claims you as the person who is broken. Like, I am this broken person. Like I'm identical with this thought, or this thought is mine, and therefore it says something really unique about me that's kind of fucked up or needs to be fixed. While for me at this moment, the thoughts just look like they're yours. They don't look like mine. So there's no suffering for me in it. Like in this particular moment, even though I'm kind of trying out the same thoughts, there's no claiming thought that says, oh yeah, I am this character who's broken. And I'll point out to the client that you've had this experience many times in your life. of talking to a relative or a family member or a friend or a coworker who may be struggling a lot, and you're listening to the person, and you may be sympathetic, you may be compassionate, you may want the best for your friend. And as they tell the story of how they're broken, essentially, you have to kind of try those thoughts on too, to in an attempt to understand them. But at that particular moment, you're not suffering in the same way that your friend is. Because at that moment, the thoughts look like, oh, these are my friend Charlotte's thoughts. They're not mine. So that's what I mean when I say that we only really suffer when we make a self out of a collection of thoughts and feelings. And that's what I often try to do. Because if you look at so much of change work, so much of it is about changing how we think and what we think and changing our state and all sorts of stuff. And I'm not knocking it. It has its place. But what really ties it all together is that it looks like these thoughts somehow define me, or that I am these thoughts fundamentally. That's where the psychological suffering comes in.
So, I mean, this sounds very easy to say, but most people don't find it that easy. Like people are saying, well, I am my thoughts. So, if I'm not my thoughts, then who am I? And, we start down a, very, people come to you for therapy, and somehow it sounds from what you're saying that you kind of like turn this into more of a spiritual guidance than a therapeutic session.
Well, yes and no. I don't really go that deeply into the whole spiritual realm, but I help them to discover that the particular thoughts that I identify with in that context is not who they are, but just this idea. Now, here's one way to help someone begin to have a glimpse of this. And it seems to us as if, I'm here now and I've had a past and I'm moving into a future. It's this stable, permanent self that's here now, has had a past and is moving into a future. And one thing I really like to ask people is, and I'll ask you, the participant, this. If you were to create two mental buckets, not physical buckets, but two mental buckets, and I were to ask you, how much of your thinking revolves around a constructed future and a reconstructed past? So past, future, like rumination, that's one bucket. And the other bucket being, thoughts that kind of describe what seems to be happening right now at this particular moment, like practical thoughts, like turn left. And when I do this with clients, the most typical answers they give me is usually 90-10 or 95-10 or 98-10, or I think the lowest estimates people give me is like 85-15 or something like that. Meaning, if you look at it, you'll begin to realize that most of your thoughts are self-referential, like they revolve around your own identity, like so much of conflict and suffering is not necessarily that much about the topics at hand, but they're about our identity and who we think we are. So much of our thinking revolves around kind of maintaining and protecting and bolstering a particular self-concept. The developmental psychologist Robert Kegan used to say that everyone's doing a second job of enhancing their image and covering up their weaknesses and promoting a particular self-image that no one's paying them to do, and which gets in the way of the job they're actually paid to do. So much of our thinking revolves around this. And virtually all of this thinking revolves around a future or a past. And then the question becomes, if so much of our thinking revolves around a future or a past, can we really experience a past? Can we really experience a past event? Can we really experience a future? Or can we really experience a future event? Like it looks that way, it seems that way, but can we really? So for example, if you were in my office here in Norway as a client and you had asked me like, I need to use the restroom, where is it? I would have said, okay, down the stairs, first door to the left. And if you had been willing to do that experiment, meaning walk downstairs, first door to the left, you would find it because there it is. Now, in the same way, if it's possible to experience a future or a past or a future event or a past event, we should be able to find it. Like we should be able to locate it in our actual experience. So would you like to play with me with this?
Yes, let's play.
All right. So what I'd like you to do, and everyone listening can tag along with this too. Now, what I'd like you to do is to just close your eyes for a little while and just take a couple of slow breaths and let gravity just do its job of just kind of sinking your body down into the chair, and just relax a bit as you settle in and as you connect with my voice. And as you relax and connect with my voice, you can allow yourself to settle. You can allow everything to just slow down a little bit. Now, what I want you to do now is I want you to test and see if it's possible to leave the present moment and to experience the future. Like forget everything that everyone has ever told you and taught you. Just go by your own experience. So test in your own experience and see if it's possible to leave this moment and to actually experience the future. So let me ask you, Eugene, are you able to actually leave this moment and to experience the future? No. So just know that in your bones. Now, some of you might be saying, yes, I can kind of imagine going to work tomorrow, or I can imagine being at the dentist on Friday. But notice that these thoughts occur now. Like they occur in this moment as you think them.
I had the same experience. Even if I was now, if I was tomorrow, it will still be a now, but tomorrow, and it's still the now, not the tomorrow. That's priority.
Yes. Now test and see if it's possible to actually experience a future event. So for example, Eugene, do you have any plans for tomorrow?
Yes.
Like something you've planned to do?
Yes.
Could you tell me one thing that you've planned to do tomorrow?
Go play soccer.
Okay, so just imagine that it's tomorrow and that you're playing soccer, and just give me a nod when you're doing that. All right, so are you now actually experiencing playing soccer tomorrow? Are you actually experiencing a future event, or are you experiencing a thought right now labeled playing soccer tomorrow?
The latter one.
The latter one. Now, do you have any plans for, let's say, next week?
Yes.
So just tell me something that you plan to do for next week.
Finish a project.
All right. So imagine that it's next week and that you're just finishing up your project in the way you'd like to. And as you experience, do you experience finishing your project, your project next week, or are you experiencing a thought right now labeled finishing my project next week?
It's a thought about experiencing my project next week.
Yeah. And if you were to imagine Christmas, like irrespective of whether you're a Christian or an atheist or Buddhist or whatever you might be, but if you were to imagine Christmas, no matter how vividly you imagine that, notice that you're not actually experiencing Christmas. You're experiencing a thought right now labeled Christmas that's occurring in this particular moment. So open your eyes, please. Now, I'll make the suggestion that to have a lot of issues with anxiety, for example, we have to kind of forget that.
Yeah.
So that it looks as if our feelings are a future barometer of sorts.
Okay.
Now, I'm not knocking planning or anticipating consequences or anything like that, but I'm trying to point people to a simple experiential fact, and that is that at the level of experience, you never actually experience a future or a future event. Like what you call a future is a thought in this very moment. Now, people are often, when I see clients daily, many of them are obsessed with the past. Many of them are obsessed with the past, and they think they relive the past. And they think that they re-experience past events. And many regression therapists in the hypnosis world are kind of promoting this idea that you're regressing or reliving past memories. Now, again, let's test this in our experience. So, Eugene,
Yes.
would you close your eyes again, please? And of course, anyone listening to this can follow along and just kind of take a couple of slow breaths again and just let your system settle a bit as you connect with my voice. And go into that space where you can experientially explore and feel, have a felt sense. Now, what I would like you to do is I would like you to try and leave the present moment and see if it's possible to experience the past. So do your best to test and see if it's possible to leave this moment and to experience the past. And let me ask you, Eugene, can you leave this moment and experience the past? Can you actually leave this moment?
The whole time.
Say again?
This damn moment stays with me the whole time, wherever I go.
Yeah. So notice that, because some of you might be saying, yes, I'm remembering this birthday party, but notice that you never leave this moment. All the feelings and images and thoughts happen right now as you think it. So just know that, just know in your bones that you never actually experience the past or a past. Like you never have, you never will, and you don't. And notice what that realization might open up for. Now, I want you to try and see if it's possible to experience a past event. Like if you can actually relive or experience a past event. So Eugene, can you think of a particular memory? It doesn't matter what, just could be 2 weeks ago, could be 2 years ago, just select something.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so would you describe to me a little bit just what's going on in the memory?
Yeah, I'm on a terrace by the sea, sipping on some fresh
And
juice.
what year is this?
3 years ago.
2 years ago.
Yeah.
All right.
2 or 3
So
years
let me
ago.
ask you this. Are you actually experiencing a past event? Meaning, are you actually experiencing being on a terrace in 2019? Or are you experiencing a thought right now, kind of labeled being on a terrace 2 years ago?
It's a thought about being there. It's a very vivid one, very nice one. Yes.
Yes. Now, notice that the about is also illusory in the sense that you can't really experience a thought about something. You can essentially just experience a thought. So notice that no matter how vivid it is, you don't actually experience 2019. You don't actually experience being on the terrace. You experience a thought in this very moment labeled being on the terrace in 2019 or whatever it's labeled. Now, I'd like to invite you to try more examples of this. You know, could be a 10-year-old memory or a 15-year-old memory, and really ask yourself, am I experiencing being on the beach in 1995? You know, am I actually experiencing a past event, or am I experiencing a thought in this moment labeled on the beach in 1995? And a thought that might be saying, yeah, I'm thinking about, which is also a thought occurring in this particular moment. So just open your eyes, please. Now, again, I'm not disputing that there aren't historical facts that may have happened, you know, historically and in our lives.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is that at the level of experience, we never actually experience a past event. We never relive anything or regress anything. Like at the level of experience, what we call the future and past are thoughts occurring at this very moment. Now, I'll offer you something. So back in, I think it was 1987, there was something called a Challenger catastrophe in the United States, where this air shuttle, you know, thing exploded and people died. And right after, a bunch of memory scientists interviewed a bunch of people. One of the scientists was called Ulrich Neisser. And they had people do an in-depth interview of where they were, what they felt, who they were with, so on and so forth. And they had people write down the answers to this and sign it. And then either 2.5 or 3 years later, they tracked down everyone who was still alive and did a new in-depth interview with everyone. And people were asked, do you remember the Challenger catastrophe? And everyone says, yes. Oh, yes, it's been imprinted into my mind. But in about 25% of the cases, there was no match between any of the details from what they wrote 2.5 years ago and what they were writing at this time.
Wow.
In less 10% of the cases, all the details matched. And in the rest of them, it was like a big combination of, you know, a big blend. And a very common comment was that people would look at their old sample for 2.5 years ago and say, that's my handwriting. I've written that, but I don't remember that. Like, that's not how I remember it. So you could say that for all practical purposes, that memory was gone. So this doesn't change the fact that there's been a Challenger explosion, but you're not reliving it. What you're experiencing now is a reconstruction. It's a brand new thought where the mood that you're in, your expectancies, your motives for remembering, things you read after the fact, the context that you're in, all of this will influence how you construct a brand new thought in this moment titled the Challenger explosion in 1987. And to be able to see that, look, this particular thought has never happened before. Like, this thought is actually brand new. I'm not reliving anything. I'm actually experiencing a new thought, can be extremely liberating. Because when you look at trauma, what people call trauma, if you really dig into it, you'll notice that what people really are disturbed by is this sense of inescapability. Like, I'm just reliving this. I'm just stuck in this. I have no way out. And this old kind of VHS film strip model of memory can contribute to people feeling stuck because they think they're reliving something. But you're actually not. I have another very funny story about this. A friend of mine who went to therapy many years ago, and his psychologist was kind of Freudian / feminist, and told my friend, let's call my friend Jake, not his real name, but we'll call him Jake. So the psychologist told Jake that, look, it's probably due to some childhood trauma, these issues you have with intimacy. So we're going to have you try to remember. And Jake was meditating at the time, so he would go home between sessions and try to remember. And after a few days, these thoughts, these memories started emerging that were quite vivid, like a lot of emotions, very clear, about him being 5 or 6 years old and trying to get into his parents' bedroom at night, and his father stiff-arming him so that he couldn't get in the door. And he felt so rejected, so lonely, so cold. And again, this was quite vivid. The feelings were quite strong. So when he came back to the psychologist was like, oh, Jake, this is a big breakthrough. This is what we're looking for. Now we have to work through the trauma. We have to process this. You have to forgive your parents. They did all sorts of work to process it. And in fairness, it helped a little bit, like not a lot, but a little bit. And then a few months later, Jake went home on vacation, Christmas vacation, and visited his mother. And he told his mother, he said, Mom, I want you to know I've been to therapy. I've forgiven you and Dad. And Jake's mom said, that's great, Jake, but can I ask for what? And Jake said, well, remember that time when I was 5 or 6 and I tried to get into you guys' bedroom and, Dad was stiff-arming me and his mother looked at him and said, but Jake, that wasn't you. And Jake was like, what do you mean? Like, that wasn't you. Like, that didn't happen to you. That happened to your stepbrother, Tom. This is something your stepfather has told you about what he did to Tom and which he regrets. And Jake was like, no way, you're kidding. So he talked to his father, who said, I've never done that. And he talked to his stepfather, who confirmed it. And this, when you listen to this, you might think, oh, that's kind of crazy. But the memory science seems to point in the direction of, no, this is kind of how we work. We reconstruct, we things we've read after the fact and dreamt, and something that happened to your stepbrother, and some photos in the family album, like we after the fact create a new story. So this particular thing had never happened. Like, this is a thought right now. He's not reliving anything. And seeing that can be enormously empowering. And there's 2 insights that I would like you to contemplate and meditate on. And the first one is that the fact that you think it means that you're not experiencing it. So the fact that you think it means that you're not experiencing it. So for example, a memory that came up for me recently was being cornered while I was out bicycling with my dog at age maybe 7 or 8 while growing up in Dubai. Seemed like a pretty traumatic memory. Now, it may or may not be true. It's so long ago, I really have no way of verifying it. But if I make that story right now and I start to get stressed, it's due to me forgetting that I'm not experiencing this. Like the fact that I think it means that I'm not experiencing it. I'm sitting in a chair here doing this
But can I
particular
not
seminar.
say, well, I'm in a chair right now, and so I'm experiencing this, and I'm also thinking about me sitting in the chair.
No,
So
because you can't really think about something. You can only have the thought, right? So it's easier to do this with like a future a future thing initially. So for example, when people do anxiety, there's usually some sort of what if thoughts.
yeah,
What if I screw up? What if I have a panic attack? What if the plane crashes? What if I get rejected on the date? Like there's some sort of what if thought. Now, I want you to really contemplate that when you think the what if thought, the fact
yeah,
that you think it means that you're not experiencing it. A good example is let's say that we were walking in the woods and there's 3 Jurgen and there's one of you. Jurgen 1 is standing. Jurgen 2 is in the middle of a fall. Jurgen 3 is on his back after having fallen. Now here's the thought. What if I slip and fall? Which Jurgen does that thought belong to? Jurgen 1, the one who's not experiencing it. The one who's just in a fall is just in a fall. The guy who's on his back might have a lot of thoughts, but he's not going to think, what if I slip and fall? Per definition, only the guy who's not experiencing it is having the thoughts. And the same goes with any so-called past event as well, meaning you may have experienced something like that or not at a particular time. But right now, at the moment of having the I am being cornered by a wild dog's thought, at the moment of thinking that, I'm not experiencing it. It's not happening. But here's a very interesting thing in terms of the I or the self-illusion, right?
yeah.
So the I is never now. Like the
Well,
I thought
what do you mean?
is,
So everybody who's talking about being the present and live in the present, who is then in the present if it's not the I?
well, here's an interesting thing. If you look for the present moment, you can't find that either. Because this particular now that you think you're experiencing, like how many are there? When did it start? When does it end? Like you can't find the now either, which shows that time itself is a thought construct.
Yeah.
Like time itself is a thought construct. You can kind of talk about the eternal now, right? Which is outside of time.
Yeah.
But both the I and the past and the future and the now are all thought constructs in a sense. Now, the I thought never refers to an experience in this moment. It always refers to something that might happen or something that we think happened at a particular time. So in that sense, you can say that the I is never now. And here's something interesting to discover. So imagine, like, let's have you imagine something bad. So imagine being home alone, and imagine that an intruder comes into the house and shoots you.
Okay.
And that you die. Now, the question is, like, if you imagine that right now, just take 20 seconds to just imagine that you're home alone, an intruder comes into the house, he points the gun at you, he threatens you, he shoots you, and you die instantly. When you've done that, you can just open your eyes. Now, the character called I in that daydream died, right?
Okay.
Right? Like in your imagination, that the character called I was just shot and killed. But notice that you did not share his destiny. Like you never do. So when I have clients imagine being booed on stage or being rejected on a date or the plane crashing, I have them notice that you, meaning just being itself, never share the destiny of the character called I in any thought. Like whether the character called I survives being shot or not, whether the character I's plane crashes or not, you don't share his destiny. Now, if I, for example, right now remember a trauma, so let's say I remember being cornered by the wild dogs.
Yeah.
The character I, when I think, who's being attacked by the dogs, may or may not be bitten, but I never share his destiny. Meaning, no matter what happens to the character called I in any thought mirror, a future or past thought, I, what you could call being itself, never shares his destiny. And that's a very interesting meditation to do. To just meditate on, for example, things going wrong, being rejected, the plane crashing, being bitten by the dog, some past experience, and notice that the character called I in the thought mirror, who this seems to be happening to, like no matter what happens to that character, you never share his destiny. Meditating
So
on
you're
that,
the one who is meditating, or you're the one who's thinking about that stuff?
well, here's an analogy. So let's say that you have a nightmare. You have a nightmare that you're on vacation, you get kidnapped by a bunch of cannibals, and they tie you to a tree, and they're going to sacrifice you to the chief. Like let's say that this is the nightmare, right? Now, you're not actually experiencing a chief, you're experiencing a thought labeled chief. You're not actually experiencing cannibals, you're experiencing thoughts labeled cannibals. Now, it seems as if you are the character that's being tied to the tree, and that all of this revolves around, right? Like in the dream, it looks as if you are the character that this all revolves around. But upon awakening, it's very clear, or it can be very clear, that the character I in the dream was just another thought. Like whether the character I actually got sacrificed to the chief or not during the dream, you, beingness itself, does not share the destiny of that particular character. Like you never really share the destiny of the character called I in any dream. It just seems that way from the perspective of being lost in the dream. Now, if you can meditate on the meditation we did when you try to experience the future in a future event, and you try to experience the past in a past event, and you imagine past or future events, and kind of notice that it seems as if you are the character that the event kind of refers to. Like you're being applauded, you're being approved, you're being successful, you're being unsuccessful, right? So it seems as if you are that character, but notice that no matter what happens to the character called I in the day mirror, in the daydream, you don't really share his destiny.
Yeah.
And there's
However, we do identify so much with that.
Yes. So it's a big difference. Let's say that the thought emerges that I'm not enough. You know, if that's not seen as a thought, it looks as if I am the person who's not enough.
Yeah.
And now I might have to improve things and get better and work on my self-esteem and do all these sorts of things. But if I'm able to see that, wait a minute, the I'm not enough thought is here. The I'm not enough thought is visiting.
Yeah.
The same thought can appear, but it no longer as easily looks as if who I am. Like, to the extent that that's seen moment by moment, there's psychological suffering or not.
So when are you using this with clients? Have you encountered clients where this was difficult to use with because they, could not wrap their minds around it, or,
Yes.
it was not their cup of tea?
Yes, many times. So I have many different frameworks, that I can use with clients, and for some clients this really resonates. For some clients it really doesn't. And if it really doesn't, I have a tendency to use a different framework.
How many do you have?
And this is of course true for any framework, that anyone ever presents. Like some people will really resonate with it. Some people will partially resonate with it, and for some people just won't get it. Like they just won't hear any of it or see any of it. But I really prefer to work this way because that whole level of identity in my mind is really very often where it's at. These thoughts look like me, they look like who I am, they look personal. And as a result of that, they need to be fixed, and they need to be controlled, and they need to be changed because they seem to imply something about me. And helping people to explore that and to see its illusory nature can be extremely liberating. And it's really interesting because a lot of the more Eastern traditions have a tendency to focus more in this direction, whereas we in the West generally have not. Yeah. We focus on the content of thinking or the process of thinking or what happened, but we very seldom refer back to, well, what is the nature of the self that all these thoughts and feelings seem to imply? Let's explore that. We relatively seldom do that. And I hope, for the future in hypnosis and NLP and these sorts of things, that there will be more practitioners who kind of combine the suggestion artistry of NLP and hypnotic modalities and Western knowledge about social psychology and memory and those sorts of things with the kind of Eastern meditation traditions that seem to point in this direction. I think that's a great marriage, or a great blend that relatively few people seem to explore, and which I'm passionate about exploring.
Beautiful. So now when you're using this this method, are there any limitations to the types of issues you can apply it to? It's like, can you use this, I don't know, for quitting smoking or for weight loss or, depression or anxiety or panic attacks or phobias or whatnot?
I don't even view it as that anymore. Okay. I mean, in terms of marketing, you have to kind of play that game because this is how people think. But, whether you call something a phobia or a compulsion or a depression or whatever it might be, people people come in and they generally have an issue with their own inner experience. Like they don't relate too well to their thoughts and feelings. And all I really do is I help people create a different relationship to their own inner experience and try to tie that to the particular context that they came in for. You know, so when people come in, they always claim to experience an object, you know, or a situation, or a future, or a past, or a low self-esteem, or something like that. And they don't actually experience those things. It just looks that way when they're lost in thought. So I view my job to kind of do various experiments with them, various games with them, where they can look at their experience and discover that, you know what, it's illusory in the sense that it's not what I thought it was. Now, when I use the term illusion, I don't mean non-existent. I don't mean that people aren't suffering. When I use the term illusion, I mean something that appears a particular way, but upon investigation, it's revealed to not quite be that way. So for example, if I had two threads at a distance, you know, one red thread and one white thread, and I intertwine them really tightly, it could look like I had a big fat pink thread. And you might go, who cares, right? But if you got curious and you came closer and you started to play with it, it's not so much that pink would disappear. It's more that you would notice that pink was never actually there. Pink was an illusion. The red thread and the white thread were kind of the reality behind the illusion. Now, of course, color itself is kind of illusory, but I don't usually push it that far with a client. You know, or the classic Buddhist story of the snake and the rope, you know, the monk who's out walking and he sees a snake, you know, and he has a high pulse and his palms are sweaty and he has a dry mouth and he has all these catastrophic thoughts. And he's able to stop and focus in. And when he does, he suddenly sees, shit, it's a rope. And the moment he truly sees that it's a rope, his experience changes. His heart rate goes down. His thinking slows. Not as a result of trying to relax, but as a result of seeing that the threat he thought he saw is not really there. So what I'm claiming is that this is pretty accurate for most of our clients. They come in lost in thought and identified with a particular set of thoughts and feelings that really looks like who they are. And my job, I view it as an agent of change, is to help them really investigate the snake to see that it's really a rope, in a sense, or investigate the pink to discover the red and the white threads behind it. And you can do that in so many artistic, fun, creative ways. And a lot of people like that and it resonates. And for some people, it just doesn't. And when it doesn't, I might do breath work or tasking or rational emotive behavior therapy or a more provocative approach, or I might do an NLP new code game. Like I can use a completely different framework, completely different set of assumptions. But this is based upon the years that I've played. This is my preferred direction to move it.
I understand. Awesome. So please, where can people learn more from you and what you do? Do you give classes, courses? Do you teach, or?
Yes, I do seminars, I do mentoring. I see clients on Skype from all over the world. And anyone who's interested in my work can contact me at my website, provocativehypnosis.com. And I also have a YouTube channel titled Provocative Hypnosis, where I release videos all the time about, you know, related topics. So those are the best ways of reaching me.
All right. So, Jürgen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being here with us today and for sharing
Thank you
from
for having me.
your way of seeing things. Yes.
Yes.
And everybody, I took my notes. I hope you took your own notes. Go ahead and share your thoughts and ideas about Jürgen's presentation. Share them in the Facebook group on his post. And then take a quick break, and we'll see you later, or we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you.